We're going to move on to our last talk of this block before our break, which is imports, 3 tips for working with open data from Ben.
Hi there, thank you very much. Okay, so another user and I from Toronto recently imported some open data from the city about washrooms that were in parks. So those are most of the examples I'm going to go through. And if you're going to do a similar kind of project, find some great open data source and you want to import it into the map. Obviously, you want to make sure it's license compatible, but also your main guide is going to be the OpenStreetMap import guidelines. So this talk is really about 3 things that are sort of not covered in that, 2 things you might want to do before, and 1 thing you might want to do after in order to advocate for more open data and also make sure that when you do your exploration of the data in the first place, you get a very solid understanding for your later work on converting it into the map. So first of all, you get a great open data source. You want to create a profile of that data. So if you imagine, in our case, we have a source of data on city washrooms, and it's a spreadsheet. For every column, we're going to try and answer 4 key questions. So first of all, each column, what does this column tell me? What's the purpose of it? Second of all, what format is it in? What kind of units does it use if it's numeric? So for example, for a description of something, it might be used from a predetermined list of items as text, or it could be free-form text that could be any value. So you want to look at some of the common values that you might find in that. So if it's numeric, it might be minimum, maximum. If it's text, you might want to get an example of what some of the common ones showing up are. And then last of all, is every row filled out, or are there some that are blank or missing? And are there any errors that you can spot? And so you can see here in our example, when you do this, it makes it really easy to then start thinking about how you're going to tag it in the OpenStreetMap schema. For example, there's this accessible column, and we can see it has predetermined phrases separated by commas, all in one piece of text. And you can start to think, okay, if it's got these 2 most common ones, maybe it's a wheelchair equals yes. And some of these other ones I can make decisions about how to tag as well. And this 1 error that we found, we're going to make sure that we don't import that into OpenStreetMap. My other tip here is when you first download the file, download it from whatever open data portal you're using, save the date that you downloaded it, and if you're going to work with it, make a copy. And then that way, if you have to redo your work later or someone else wants to get the same results as you, they can do that. So some quick tools you can use. If you're not comfortable with coding, I would start with something like Tableau Public. It's very good. If you want to, something you can click around with, but you want to start to get into coding, there's an official plugin called for VS Code called Data Wrangler. And so it'll let you click around like you can in Tableau, but it'll actually start generating examples for you of how you would do those transformations or filtering in Python. If you are comfortable with coding, you could use something like a Jupyter Notebook if you want to be more interactive. Using the GeoPandas library is a really great one to use for OpenStreetMap data downloaded from Overpass. Or you can just start scripting, set a breakpoint, and play around with your data frame in the terminal. So the second thing, as you're trying to explore and get a sense of your data, and before you get into transforming it into tags to import into the map, you want to do some validation. So with your data profile, you want to assert every time you download that data and start transforming it, does this still meet my expectations for what the data looks like? So this code example on the left here is using Pandera, which is one popular library, works really well with pandas or GeoPandas data frames. And then Pydantic is also very popular. It's basically saying, I'm expecting this accessible washroom list to be, 1 piece of text. Sometimes it's going to be blank. I want it in the data set because I'm using it. And then here's a function where I'm going to break out all those predetermined phrases that are in the list between the commas, and I'm going to make sure that there's nothing on the list that I don't expect. So if the city were to introduce its first ever washroom with an adult change table, then that would throw an error because that's a new value in the list, and I could then think about whether I want to map that or not. So it helps reduce surprises. Okay, so with that solid foundation of working with your data and understanding it, you do a great data import, you do the process of consulting with the community. But after it's in the map, there's 1 more thing you should do, and that's advocate. So primarily to 2 groups. So in a lot of open data portals, there might even be a contact info for the staff or department of the government who's responsible for that data set, and also politicians, because they have an essential role in terms of setting open data policy and determining whether governments are more likely to share things with the public. And you want to say, first of all, thank you for all the work they did to make the data open, and to let them know that someone was using the results of their work. Tell them about how the data was used. And I think most tangibly, especially with politicians, give them a great example of how the data made someone's day-to-day life better. So for example, with us, we imported some washrooms, over 200 additional washrooms added in Toronto. So that means, Strava uses OpenStreetMap data. If someone goes for a run or a bike ride using Strava, and they, oh, I need to do a bathroom break in a park, it's going to be so much easier for them to find that washroom when they need it. And that way, that helps to promote more open data to be shared by governments in the future, and that helps us make the map better. So that's it. Thank you very much. And I put some links, which I'll put in the Slack as well, in these slides to our code examples that we used in our import.